The Homebrew Computer Club, because of its sharing attitude, was very much the opposite of business as usual. It was very much counterculture. It was very much like open source. You give away something, you write it down, other people can look at it, improve on it, come back to you, get some, little amendments made. But, companies did form in the Homebrew Computer Club. I mean, the people that attended the Homebrew Computer Club formed companies to sell products to make money. And then eventually Steve Jobs came by, and we actually started a little company, but not really an official company with big money and boards of directors and that sort of stuff. When we did that later on with the Apple II computer, the day that I left Hewlett-Packard to go to Apple and start Apple, I never went back to the Homebrew Computer Club because now I was in a different world.
There was the sort of famous early letter from Bill Gates, wasn't there, about the software and copying the software? Can you tell me a bit about that?
Sure. Our computer club got very interested in these upcoming computers, and then it became aware that there was a basic language, a computer language that would run on these small, low-cost computers that you build yourself, and then you have to spend a lot of money to buy enough memory to run a programming language and to buy a teletype to type your stuff on. You have to spend several times the cost of a car, but then you could run. Bill Gates and Paul Allen had written a BASIC, came on a big paper tape reel, and you read it in on a teletype machine. It would get into the memory of the computer, and then it could run programs. You could type in a game out of a book of games written in the BASIC language, type in the game, and play it on the computer. This was a goal of probably every one of the 500 of us in the Homebrew Computer Club, was to get to the point that we could play games on our own computer. And Bill Gates became a little bit famous and well known for this software going around. Well, we had one copy of the tape that our club library had purchased. And one member of the club, Dan Sokol actually, took that tape and borrowed it for 2 weeks. And when he came back, he brought back like 4 copies. He copied the paper tape at his company, AMI. And he brought him back and he said, the new rule is anytime you take something from the club library, you have to return at least that many copies. And it's kind of funny. And we got a letter from Bill Gates all upset, copyright, you're copying software and you shouldn't. And I agree. I agree with that.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the letter? And just because obviously, whatever you think about it, it marks a sort of change. It's a different attitude, isn't it, to some of that kind of just sharing and sharing.
Say it again. I missed the word.
Yeah, just tell me a little bit more about the letter
Oh, sure. The letter from Bill Gates to our Homebrew Computer Club got some notoriety and fame over the years, and because it was basically, hey, you have to pay for what you use. And, to this day, we still have, so you look at all the reports of how many kids just copy all their music for free. I don't know. I don't really agree with that. I was brought up with very strong ethics. You are who you say you are. You tell the truth. Truth is the #1 ideal in my life. And so I don't like encouraging children to learn. Anytime you can get something for free, it's okay. I do not agree with that. I have never copied a piece of software, taken a piece of software illegally, music, no. I won't touch that, Why don't you, you can afford something and stick within your means. That's what I believe in. And I have a lot of friends that are musicians. They are creators of the world. They're like writers. And how do you imagine a writer writing a book? How are they going to get paid if everyone copies it for free? Look at the royalties. So many of my musician friends, their royalties have just dropped and dropped and dropped. People are still getting their music more than ever before, but they're not paying.
So do you think some of the, just in the difference of opinion or the kind of different attitude, then that you can see about this idea of software or piracy or things that should be free or whether they should be paid for. Do you think, in a way, that's the first example of an argument that's still going on today?
Sure. Yeah, well, when Bill Gates wrote his letter to the Homebrew Computer Club, upset that we were freely copying his BASIC that he'd spent all his time and energy working on, he was pointing out that a problem, which is the digital age unearthed the ability to copy things for no cost. I mean, there were times I remember times in, like I was taught that communist Russia, they weren't allowed to have copy machines, and then all of a sudden we started trying to ban copying of anything over here, and it's just a problem. How do you solve it? In the long term, it's almost like huge forces of nature that you cannot turn back, huge hurricanes of force. Eventually, it's going to be so easy to copy things that their value, their cost, what people will pay has got to go down. It just has to eventually. The laws are trying to hold it out. I notice that every court case to this day tends to side with copyright holders, and you cannot have for free.
And do you see some of that same argument, I guess, with like you talked about music and file sharing? Do you think that's something that's ever going to be resolved, or is that just going to keep playing out in the same way?
Now that it's so easy to buy a little card and put 500 movies on, one little card that you can plug into a camera if you want, it's very difficult. When one time in my office, a gentleman came in, on this whole copyright issue. A gentleman came in and I was talking about, my gosh, you could almost get to the point you could put a movie on a card. He said, oh, someday you'll have a card and you'll have 500 movies on it. And I thought, that changes life as we know it. It changes the rules. If I have a card that's bits, ones and zeros, and I give you those ones and zeros, the digital age says a song is no longer music. A song is a collection of a billion numbers. If I give you those billion numbers, you've got it. It's so easy. Our computer technology lets us copy everything instantly. No, it's very scary. It means a new world. A new world's ahead. And it may take decades. It may even take centuries before we actually get to the final ending point. Because, people are used to the old ways, and you always want to keep a little bit of the old. And the old is everything was too complicated for an individual person to make all the copies in the world of. You sell them a record and on vinyl, and they've got that one record. It only stays in one record. I mean, they could loan it to a friend and get it back, but it's pretty much, one record. Now all of a sudden you give out a song and it could be 10,000, 100,000, 1 million copies, just distributed that instantly. The cost of production used to regulate this industry, some industries that are based on information, meaning everything like music, books, newspapers, and movies. All these industries are having severe problems today already, and it's just been, what has it been? Like a decade and a half.
When did you first come across the internet then? What was your early experience, and did that seem like a whole new world of possibilities as well?
Yeah. I heard about the internet from friends at first. I wasn't one of the earliest people in it. I had friends in companies like Hewlett-Packard, friends that were tied into the university community, and I would watch them get online with this thing called, I got into the ARPANET before it was the internet, but now they had the internet and they could talk to their friends at different universities and share scientific information. I knew something was going on, but I didn't relate it to how valuable it could be to normal humans. And then a friend of mine told me he'd gone on the internet with a friend at a certain year and seen some amazing things. This internet was going to take over everything, because now, for the first time, we had a program called Mosaic that put pictures with your text on the internet. The original internet that brought us the web from Tim Berners-Lee brought us the web, but it was only words. It was only words. It was merging the pictures in that all of a sudden made it halfway to what personal computers were, or a part of the way there. And anyway, I was scared. I didn't know a thing about it. I had a friend get a friend of a friend come in and teach me, here's how you set up the internet in your house or your company. First, you have to rent some copper lines from a company called Bell something, and then you have to do this, you have to get these kind of machines and servers, and I was scared. I didn't know what any of this stuff was, but I did it. I took the risk. I went and I got friends and I got equipment and I made purchases. I set things up. I didn't even use a Macintosh computer I was familiar with. I had to get a Sun computer, and I got something hooked up, and I had to make phone calls and say, are you supplying the clock, or are we? Something's not working, and got it fixed and working. And then for 10 years, I became a network administrator, keeping all these routers that route the signals out to this part of the network and give you internet addresses and all this crazy geeky stuff. It was a tough time, but I got into the internet so early, I got a 3-letter .com. I got Woz, my name, .com. But you know what? Everybody wants their name .com, and I like to do things different. And I'm sort of a nonprofit guy, so I always use woz.org instead, because .org is for nonprofit.
That's right. And did you have experience of early online communities, or know of, or hear of, things like the Well and so on?
When the internet came, turns out there were some things that preceded the internet. There were, the Source was the first big, huge organization. It was a computer that tens of thousands of people could dial into with accounts and leave messages for others to read. And then came AOL. AOL for the first few years was Macintosh only, because it was graphics in a display like we're used to on our computers today. Instead of just text and you answer, print me out a list of my options and I'll type 3 for this and 3 for that. So I taught classes around this time, and I would teach all the students every year. I would give them AOL and watch how you go into chat rooms and find people that are strangers, and the amount of communication just explodes in your life. The number of strangers that you can meet but actually talk to, and you don't have to be afraid of a personal interaction. It was just amazing. You could download all these neat software, stuff. And, if you had an AOL account, download all the software you needed. You could research different news. You could get into groups of different types of education. There were places for parents, places for kids. What an incredible world was opening up. Now, here came the internet. and it was sort of like a subset of it. But at first, the internet was occupied by the academicians in the universities, and they were putting out different kinds of information than what you do in normal fun life. You know, it wasn't kids, it wasn't young education. It was, you know, so at first the internet was a little bit more boring by, you know, and tame by regards. They didn't have sound, they didn't have movies, they didn't have all the things flash and all that we're used to today. So it was a very early start. But I thought, this is so important. This internet is a coming thing. We still had to dial into the internet on 50K modems, even slower modems, I think, when the internet first came. We didn't even have 50K modems yet. We didn't have DSL, we didn't have broadband, we didn't have cable modems, we didn't have satellite anything. So it was very, very slow. And I got all my classes of young kids, 10-year-olds on up. I always, you know, taught them, here's how you set up and use the internet, have email addresses and do that sort of thing, because it was still easy to see it was the most important thing in the world. I went home one night. I just set up the internet for the first day ever in my house. And I said, this internet, someday you're going to be able to buy things on it. You know, things that you're not used to going to stores. And we typed in, my wife and I typed in coffee. And we found a place in Hawaii that you could order coffee. I mean, we were just probably sending them a little note that they would then do all the paperwork and do it manually. It wasn't really done through the internet, but it was really neat to see you could actually buy something on the internet. That was going to change the world of commerce forever. And this was in the early days, the late 90s, when all the investors and all the venture capitalists figured the internet is going to take over the world and anything internet related is going to be so valuable. They invested, and they overinvested more rapidly than the technology could really come about in robust fashion. So then we had the dot-com crash, and here we are today. And I think everybody would look at the internet and say, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. Everything I do on the internet, I did before a different way that was more work or slower or worse. I didn't get immediate satisfaction. It's changed our life quite a bit.